But first, for the first time, a former employee of Schumann Co is sharing his story after a steam explosion killed a team member and injured 13 others.
6 or 7 months now, and you know, it still feels like it happened yesterday. You know, none of us have ever had to deal with something like this.
This is a story that we have covered extensively when it happened back in February, and again this week as OSHA found the foundry was at fault and failed to protect its workers.
So tonight, News 5's Bryn Caswell is following through and telling us the struggles that employee is facing.
The ceiling was caving in.
Former Schumann Co warehouse manager Tom Nagel recalls February 20th as a nightmare. His 21-year-old son Landon was also working at the foundry at the time.
I still have dreams about it, you know, about the explosion and you know, how much worse it could have been. You know, knowing my son was on the other side of the wall before the explosion hit.
Nagel says it was a typical Monday until he heard and felt a boom.
There was still debris falling. My focus was calling my son to see where he was at.
What Nagel describes next is what he called a war zone.
People were coming out bloody. One of the hourly guys, you know, had to have help. His leg was, you know, his leg was almost detached.
He says there was no order or procedures in place.
We were just kind of trying to figure out who was still in the building. There was no like disaster drill or protocol.
Nagel managed to find his son, but one of his dearest friends and co-workers of nearly 18 years, Steve Mullins, was still missing.
That's when it really all kind of hit Landon and me, you know, that we've just lost a really close friend.
46-year-old Steve Mullins died in the explosion. He leaves behind his wife Danielle and 2 kids.
He was the ultimate friend. He really was. He cared about everybody. He cared about Schumann. And, you know, it's tragic that he's not here anymore.
An OSHA investigation found Schumann Co was at fault for failing to protect its workers. OSHA says the explosion happened when employees were inspecting a water leak in a furnace and did not have lockout or evacuation orders in place. Nagel says months leading up to the explosion, furnaces were getting shut off almost once a week because of leakage issues.
It is upsetting. We didn't have a protocol for disaster like this.
Over the last 6 months, Nagel has been navigating his new normal, being unemployed and grieving a close friend.
Will you ever go back to working in another foundry?
I can't say never. I don't think you know, right now.
Nagel wants to see his former company held accountable and feels this incident was preventable. Until then, his final moments with Steve continue to replay in his mind.
It still hurts. There's not a day. There's literally not a day, an hour that goes by during the day that I don't think about him and his family, what they lost.
In Cuyahoga Falls, Bryn Caswell, News 5.
And we'll continue to follow through on this story as we learn new developments. And if there is a story we've told that's important to you or your community and you think we need to stay on top of it or revisit it, email us the details at tips@wews.com.